We've all been there. You spend an afternoon practicing a new skill, maybe a difficult piece on the piano or a complex snowboarding trick. By the end of the session, it finally clicks. But when you return the next day, you're back to zero. The mastery you felt yesterday has completely vanished. This frustration is often framed as a failure of discipline, especially in a culture that treats learning like a standardized recipe. We're told that if we just put in the 10,000 hours, mastery is guaranteed. But these models rely on a flawed assumption that adult brains are essentially identical, static pieces of hardware waiting for a specific amount of data to be uploaded. Modern imaging shows the opposite. Your brain is highly active, even when you're doing nothing, and it physically alters its own anatomy every time you encounter a new fact or practice a motor skill. Because this physical rewiring is constant and based on your specific experiences, no two brains are anatomically the same. A universal learning recipe cannot exist because it is being processed by an organ that is biologically unique to the individual. This process of neuroplasticity happens in 3 distinct phases. First, there is chemical change. To support short-term memory, your brain rapidly increases the chemical signaling between neurons. These changes happen quickly, which explains why you can see a sudden improvement during a single practice session. However, those chemical spikes fade just as fast. If they don't trigger a physical change, your progress disappears overnight. Long-term mastery requires the second phase, structural change. This is where the brain builds new physical connections between neurons, literally altering its own shape to support new memories. Building these structures takes more than a few hours. It requires sustained practice and, more importantly, a period of struggle to force the brain to invest the energy needed to grow new connections. We can see the physical evidence of this in specialists. Research shows London taxi cab drivers, who memorize the city's vast layout, have larger brain regions dedicated to spatial mapping than average. Similarly, people who read Braille develop larger hand sensory areas in their brain. The physical architecture of their mind is reshaped by their specific work. The final phase is functional change. As you repeat a behavior, the brain makes those specific regions more excitable, shifting entire networks of activity so that the behavior becomes faster and more intuitive. Mastering a skill means moving past temporary chemical signaling and successfully rebuilding the brain's architecture through both structural and functional changes. Dr. Laura Boyd's research into stroke rehabilitation demonstrates how personalized these changes are. Despite having similar injuries, stroke patients often recover at completely different rates and through different patterns. Historically, the medical field viewed this variability as a statistical nuisance. Studies were designed to minimize individual differences in order to find a single, standardized intervention that worked for everyone. However, that variability is actually the most valuable data we have. It proves that the average brain doesn't really exist. Every brain responds to therapy and learning in its own way. To improve recovery, researchers use biomarkers, distinct characteristics of brain structure and function, to match specific therapies to individual patients. It's a move towards personalized medicine that respects the brain's unique anatomy. This clinical lesson applies to all of us. Because our brain structures are shaped by our unique histories, the same personalized approach used in medicine is necessary for education. If our brains are biologically unique, then our methods for learning must be as well. The primary driver of change in your brain is your behavior. There is no shortcut. Neuroplasticity is a result of the work you do. In fact, the struggle is part of the process. Data suggests that increased difficulty during practice leads to both deeper learning and more significant structural changes in the brain. But neuroplasticity is a two-way street. It can just as easily reinforce negative behaviors. The same mechanism that builds a new skill also wires in bad habits, chronic pain, and addictions. Your brain is being reshaped by everything you choose to do, and just as importantly, by everything you choose not to do. This means you have to study how you learn best. Rather than following a generic 10,000-hour rule, you must identify the specific behaviors that lead to your own structural changes and repeat them. Every experience you encounter today will change your brain. Because you are the primary driver of that change, the challenge is to deliberately choose the struggle required to build the brain you want.